Bizarre Reality Media. The reality we live in can be a very strange place. Most of the time, fact being stranger than fiction. How will we ever start to understand this reality we live in unless we question everything? Join me and a guest as we unravel the mysteries of this reality, one topic at a time. This is Inquiries of Reality with Shayn Orin. What is up, Bizarre Society, and welcome to the expanse of deep conversational exploration into the fringes of social norms. I'm the one Nickel Shayn, aka the original Shayn Squatch, and today for you guys, I've got Mark Young with me, a guy who's turned his life around in the most inspiring way. He'll share how embracing authentic strength and traditional values can transform communities and heal society. We'll dive into the challenges men face today, the importance of honest conversation, and how Mark's bold stance against societal pressures is sparking a movement. If you're ready to explore purpose-driven masculinity and community rebuilding, you're in the right place. But before we get into this fascinating conversation, just a couple of quick things. For anyone that may have been curious what happened with me last week and why there was no new episodes posted, unfortunately, there was a big internet outage around me, and I had no internet for about a week, so I was not able to record any episodes, so unfortunately, I fell behind a little bit. But if you guys want to make sure you guys keep up to date on anything like that going on, I always make sure that I stay up to date on Instagram and Facebook and all that stuff. So just wanted to give you guys a bit of an update if you guys aren't already following over there. But anyways, moving on a personal note, April 14th is the anniversary of my arrival on this planet, aka my 32nd birthday. So if you guys are interested in helping me support another year on this planet and chasing down all these different rabbit holes, please consider helping out the show and helping me out on a personal level with some financial issues. Donating to the show directly, as I usually say, PayPal, Venmo, Cash App are always the most preferred ways. Anything and everything is always appreciated. And also, I would definitely appreciate it if you guys wouldn't mind leaving a birthday review or rating for the show. It's been a long time since I've been able to read one of those on the show, so it'd be really, really cool to be able to read one of those from you guys on my birthday. And of course, I will give you guys a big shout out in the process of that. All of those things are, again, a lot more helpful than buying a birthday card. And of course, it keeps the lights on around here and it keeps the coffee flowing for me. So any and all support is always appreciated. And if you guys are interested in catching the next live show of Bizarre Inquiries, that'll be happening on May 7th at the usual time, 7:15 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on the Bizarre Reality Media YouTube channel. And if anybody has any questions, clips, or articles that they would like to submit for that, make sure you guys get it to us before then. Recently, we did have a listener submitted clip, and we definitely appreciated it. So hopefully we'll have some more of those coming in the future. And if you guys would like to send one in to me personally, or if you guys are interested in getting a hold of me for being a guest on the show, sharing your bizarre experiences or encounters, or contacting me for any other reason whatsoever, you guys can get a hold of me through email, which is inquiriesofrealitypodcast@outlook.com, or you guys could always call or text the Bizarre Reality Media hotline, and that number is 313-364-1551. And for any professional inquiries, you guys can email me at bizarrerealitymedia@outlook.com. And if you guys missed any of that, it is all available down in the show description. And with that, let's get into the show. Please welcome to the show, Mark Young from Belfast Breakfast Baps. How's it going today, man?
It's going good. And yourself?
Not doing too bad, man. Absolute pleasure to have you come on the show. I had heard you talk to a couple other podcasters about all of the fascinating work you were doing. And a lot of the stuff that I've been talking about on the show recently seems like it kind of incorporates a lot of what you're doing with your work as far as mental health from like a male perspective. So I'm really, really excited to get into what exactly you do and what exactly your work is, man.
Okay, well, so base level, I make breakfasts for a living. So Belfast Breakfast Baps. But recently, so 130 days ago, I think now, I got sober and became a Christian, and my life has changed quite dramatically ever since, because I've tried to live my faith as well as, just receiving forgiveness. I've tried to live in grace and tried to pass it on. And through that, we've started feeding the homeless from the shop, doing community dinners for the elderly, doing different fundraisers, and just basically trying to give back to the community and sort of build back old masculinity, where you stood up for your community and you were there, once your own house was in order.
Just out of curiosity, Belfast Breakfast Baps, was that already started before you had started your kind of like recovery journey? And what was it before you had started this journey where you wanted to kind of give back to the community?
So I started Belfast Breakfast Baps in 2024, and I was in active addiction at the time, and I was always a very outspoken person. So I have ended up locally and internationally in the news for my opinions. I refused before the Bap shop. I used to own a gym, and I was approached by a transgender woman, so biological male, and asked would I train them, and I simply said no, because where are they going to change, etc. And it's just not a minefield I'm willing to get into. And as a result of that, I ended up in the newspapers for transphobia, even though I was protecting the current members there, because how do you police that? Do you know what I mean? Where do they change? Where, other people may feel uncomfortable.
That's something that a lot of people don't get to, is like like I was kind of mentioning a little bit earlier, when it comes to like certain aspects of like even like masculinity, like when it comes to like that whole thing, beyond whatever it is, like it's going to make the typical like woman feel uncomfortable. But on the other flip side of it, like I feel like there needs to be these certain spaces where like men can just be like masculine men, and they don't have to have this like pressure of like, not saying the right thing around the right types of people and things. So like there's these certain areas that I feel like just need to stay these like places for like masculine men. And of course, I'm not saying that there's not places like for those types of people, but clearly it seems like you're just trying to run a place that's just for, the average trying to go to the gym. And it's like, clearly not that place. And so when you have that kind of person come into that place and try to like almost like throw a wrench in like the gear, it's almost kind of like read the room sometimes. Like you weren't necessarily trying to start an issue. You're also trying to almost on the flip side say like, this isn't necessarily like the place for you, unfortunately. And then people spin that into something a lot bigger than it has to be, when even just from a simple like manner, like you were kind of saying, like you were protecting the current members, because I'm sure that, it's not something that they were comfortable with in their gym.
Well, the proof is in the outcome, because immediately they went to the media, they blew it up out of all proportion. They asked me a straightforward question. They said to me, by the way, I'm trans, would that be an issue? And I answered the question honestly, and they tried to sue me for £20,000, and it was just ridiculous, because for a start, leaving aside anything else about masculine spaces, but if it's your own place of business, surely you have the right to serve or not serve, or whoever you please. But I stuck to my guns anyway, and nothing came of it. And then I opened the Baps shop and said another couple of controversial things, and ended up in the papers again and through the court systems for posting stuff. Got arrested 3 times in a month for posting stuff online. Mad country, to be honest. That's still ongoing in court. And then, I got sober and things changed dramatically. Still the same person, still the same opinions, just not as chaotic. And my life aligned a bit better, because I started showing up for myself and showing up for other people.
Say, not to dwell too much on it, because you had mentioned that it's currently something that you're still kind of dealing with, but not to, again, side tier onto this too much, but considering I don't get to talk to somebody from the UK very often just because of like the time zone difference and stuff, I wanted to kind of get into this whole idea of like freedom of speech or so for a moment. And it seems like before, I believe it was about COVID time or so, that seems like when this like really, really hard push really started getting pushed towards like, particularly you guys out in the UK with this whole like freedom of speech thing where, you know, if you guys post the wrong thing on social media, you literally have like police coming to your house. And we hear about this stuff in the United States, but I don't think we really understand like the full gratification of this. So at least coming from somebody from like the UK, I'd like to get your perspective on this, on like when you kind of feel like all this kind of started, what you kind of feel like the push was for it, and like what the severity is, or you feel the severity is of it like currently, and where it is potentially going to.
So obviously having experienced it firsthand, getting arrested 3 times in a month for stuff posted in social media. I believe the problem is made out to be worse than it is, and I was a pretty unique case, to be honest, because it was already sort of visible, and it kind of snowballed. But I believe it's made out to be worse than it is in the UK. Certainly there is issues with freedom of speech, and you are expected to, you know, adhere to a party line or whatever. But for me personally, I don't really care what system or rules I live in. You know, I operate how I operate, and I'll deal with the consequences, you know.
See, I've always kind of felt like this, particularly at least what you guys are experiencing in the UK, kind of getting back into what we were mentioning a little bit earlier, is particularly like an attack on masculinity, because sometimes I feel like the best way for guys to just vent in general is just to like express things out loud in like an angry way. It doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to like act violently because of it, but sometimes guys just need to like angrily get out their opinions. So I kind of feel like, again, this attack seems like it's partially coming back on this like whole idea of masculinity, because, you know, that's one of like the key things is you want to be able to just express what you want to say. You want to be able to say what you got to say. But on the back end of that, of course, the other side is, you know, if you say the wrong thing to the wrong person, you're going to expect that you're probably going to get popped in the mouth. But, you know, that's kind of the whole thing with freedom of speech, is that it ends up being, it doubles up on both sides. But as soon as you trying to censor one side, then I feel like it's this constant battle where it's like, how far is their censorship going to go? When can we just go back to the days where we realize that like speech is just speech? And again, you might get smacked in the mouth for it, but at the end of the day, like, you know, it's not going to drastically hurt your neighbors. Like, we're getting to the point now where we're ushering bullying so far out of society that it seems like nobody can take any sort of, you know, like abuse or like negative opinion anymore. Like, to a certain extent, you know, I feel like bullying is needed in society.
I fully agree with that concept, because if we were to strip things back to the bare bones, I would believe that there's no need for political structures in general. I believe that socially we would check ourselves naturally anyway. As you say, you know, speech naturally does check itself anyway, because if you overstep the mark, you're going to get a punch in the mouth, or, you know, something's going to come of that. There is consequences to speech. Nothing is free. But you need to obviously weigh up the consequences versus your want to get that expression out there or whatever. And to be honest, I don't really care about, you know, obviously it's a very big inconvenience being arrested and all the rest, but like, I think for a large tactic, they try and do that to break your mentality, to make you afraid. But like, so what? What's a couple of days in prison? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, like at a certain point, it's almost one of those things where, like, if enough people break the system, how are they eventually going to police it? You know, like if everybody's scared to post stuff on social media, then every single person that posts something, then they're going to get attacked and flagged. But at a certain point, it's like if you unleash the floodgates and everybody just expresses their opinions, and we go back to the point where we realize that like the internet is the Wild West and we can just leave it there, and it doesn't mean that we have to live that way in our normal society. It's almost like a means of being able to just like vent for a while. But we've gotten to a point in society where it's almost like we're dampering all of these means for people to be able to like vent anonymously, not realizing that it's almost like, a needed part of society. Because like even back in the day, it's like people would write hate letters to other people anonymously. Like sometimes you just need to like vent your frustration into something and then just let it go. But the problem is like people just dwell on these ideologies too much, and it gets to a point where like people do take that stuff into the real world, and now they think that all these people that they're arguing with on the internet is the same people they're going to be dealing with in the real world. So now everybody is instantly in this like attack defense position all the time, and they don't realize that like their reality that they live in is exactly like what they want it to be and what they're perceiving it to be.
Well, I mean, you hit upon something there. People don't actually understand the power they have over their own reality, and it's avoidance that has left culture in the state that is currently in. You know, people not, you know, once they removed the man from the home, that was discipline gone, and young men being brought up in single parent households are, you know, several times more likely to end up in the prison system, etc. You know, there's knock-on effects, and it's clearly by design at this point. Looking back, you know, social welfare was introduced as, you know, a good thing, but really it incentivized single parenthood and removed the father from the home and made you rely on the state and removed the reliance on community. And it was very strategically done, and it was eroded over years, you know, sort of done under our noses, and we haven't even realised. Each generation's got that wee bit softer, that wee bit more lenient, and care that little bit less about, you know, as a man, you're supposed to be the spiritual steward of your house. You're supposed to be there, present, sober, not off your tits Friday to Monday, you know, which most of today's generation are. And it's going across all generations, especially in this country. Most people just live for the weekends, men especially.
Yeah, I've noticed that too. A lot of people, it seems like they have like no purpose or really like anything to like look forward to, or real structure. And when you get into like some of these like psychological experiments, like the Universe 25 experiment, if you're familiar with it, it was this experiment where they basically created this like rat utopia. And once they got to a certain number where like they essentially had everything they needed, they started seeing that like society would collapse because these rats would basically run out of like positions to fill in society. And I think we've kind of gotten there with men, that men have been so suppressed in society that, you know, we've gotten to this point where it's like no guy feels like they really have a purpose other than, it seems like a lot of the time listening to most guys talk, you know, living for that weekend of going and drinking or trying to get girls. That seems like, you know, that's the main guy's purpose in life now. So at that point, it's like this constant chase of like feeling completely like endlessly purposeless. And
it's also what we're presented with as the alternative to the suppressed masculinity. So, you know, you've got suppressed masculinity on one side, and then you've got an arsehole like Andrew Tate on the other side, who's like, you know, bang as many bitches as possible. Being a man's about having a Bucati, you know, all these unrealistic expectations, and to be quite honest, degrading expectations. Why is multiple women a sign of masculinity? Why is treating women less than you a sign of masculinity? I mean, it's the complete inversion of the masculine message.
Hold on tight, guys. We'll be right back after this brief commercial break. And now back to the show. I mean, I almost kind of feel like it might be like a psyop to a certain extent, because as we've kind of had this push to kind of go against masculinity, it seems like at that same time, there's this like huge presentation of like this like overly toxic, like unrealistic masculinity. So it's almost like you're creating this hatred towards masculine men while you're also creating this like stereotype of masculine men that other men are trying to live up to because they don't have these like masculine role model figures anymore. So they're like living up to this expectation that doesn't actually exist, while that expectation is something that society also hates. So it's almost like you're psyoping men into, you know, essentially going against masculinity, but thinking that masculinity is this completely different thing than what it actually is. And unfortunately, it seems like there's a lot of leftover from previous generations too, that, you know, we kind of have this mix up where we have this extremely fake toxic masculinity going on, while we have some of the previous generation where, you know, they had this like, all right, this is what a man does, this is what a man doesn't do. So we kind of have this mix of like, all right, we need to figure out how to deal with our emotions properly as men, while also trying to figure out not to be these like toxic masculine men. We're like in this weird generational psyop where it's like we really don't know which direction to go. Like most things, it just seems like there's so much data thrown at you all the time. You don't know what to do with it.
I think men and women both seem to be running around trying to plug a God-sized hole with chemicals, and there's no chemical solution to a spiritual problem. And you know, until you align yourself spiritually, mentally, and physically with I believe Christ and the God of the Bible, your life's going to be turbulent. You're going to lack purpose and you're going to lack direction. That's just how it's going to be until you submit to something greater than yourself. You know, everything else teaches you to look inwardly and to, you know, all these other spiritual journeys are to find the inner self. Whereas Christianity is about serving others and serving Christ. And that is where I believe true freedom is found, because when do you feel best? When you're doing something good for other people. That we're physiologically wired to feel good, you know, doing good for others, and I think that's by design. So,
well, I guess that's a perfect spot, because I didn't want to sidetrack too much from your work. I want to make sure we were able to get back into it. So talking about, of course, giving back to the community and everything, I'd love to get back into this progression of Belfast Breakfast Babs after you had mentioned that, you know, you went through this controversy with posting things on social media. And was that around the time that you would start actually trying to transition this place over to being able to give back and help out the community?
So the helping out in the community kind of came 30 to 40 days into getting sober and becoming a Christian, and realizing that, you know, it's not just a case of saying a prayer and asking for forgiveness. Your life needs to start reflecting it as well. And I believe that's why Christianity is very unattractive to a lot of people, because modern Christianity doesn't seem to come with any change. You know, it just seems to be lovey-dovey and everything's accepted, whereas the Christ of the Bible does have standards and does have rules and does have requirements of you. You know, it's faith without works is dead. And so I decided I wanted to start doing stuff for the community. So I started doing like a homeless Monday, where it was free for the homeless to come up and eat on a Monday in the shop, and nobody was coming up from the city centre. So I decided I would bring the food into town. So I've been going in every day for the last 9 weeks in the city centre with 30 sausage, bacon, Baps every day, to the point now where I've got a good relationship with a lot of the guys. They look forward to seeing me coming in. But at the same time, it's very simple, and it's a very human moment in their day as well, you know.
And as far as like some of the programs and stuff that you're doing, what are some of the programs that you're doing for, like, I saw you mentioned that you're doing things for the youth now too?
So in the mornings we would do free school breakfasts so obviously no local child has to go to school hungry. So you get like a sausage bap and a bottle of water and a piece of fruit before school, before 9 a.m. Just have to come into the shop and quote the word school and be in uniform, and it's free. So, and most of this is being funded by the community around the Facebook page. Some of it obviously is my own money as well, but mostly it has been carried by the community, which is even more fantastic, because that's really what I've been trying to do overall, is bring back a sense of community and local pride. You know, Belfast used to be very much a very close-knit place for all our problems, you know.
Just out of curiosity too, since you had mentioned that you had a little bit of controversy as far as like the news and stuff goes, when you had started to flip all this stuff over and you started to actually try to give back to the community, did you notice any like pushback or anything from the news, or did they try to actually like come in and actually try to promote and help out what you were doing?
At Christmas time, I was supposed to have missed a court date. I didn't miss a court date, but I was arrested, and I was out within 2 hours. But the media released, I can't remember what the headline was, but the opening couple of lines was self-styled self-help guru or something. They rebranded me as a self-help guru, which tickled me greatly. Because, I mean, even the term self-help is hilarious because it's coming from somebody else.
Say, I'd love to also, speaking of self-help too, I'd love to get into your journey a little bit here, because you had mentioned, of course, that you were a little bit of I don't remember exactly what you had mentioned. I'm assuming alcohol and maybe some other things, and you had gotten yourself clean. Oh, cocaine. And you had gotten yourself clean. I'd love to hear about the journey of what pushed you to want to get yourself clean. And I'd love to hear this like coming to Jesus moment that actually made you want to like convert over to Christianity and really start to want to give back to people.
So they're sort of hand in hand, and there's no real moment, to be honest. Just a number of factors of I've always believed in the Bible, and I've always believed in Christ, and I've never had the excuse of not knowing. I've just always ignored it. I started getting very, very convicted, even through drinking and sniffing cocaine daily. I was up to like 3.5 grams a day and 2 to 3 bottles of wine a day. I was doing it pretty hardcore, like, and in the midst of all that, I was able to get the clarity that this had to stop. I felt that I had a lot more to offer to the world sober. I felt that I had a lot more that I was meant to do, and I wasn't going to be able to do that with this fog in my life. I was still functioning. I was still running businesses. I was still launching a podcast, but I was empty. I was unhappy, and I wasn't showing up for myself, and I wasn't showing up for my family. And I flipped that around, and I didn't use AA. I didn't use any of these things. I used prayer. I used routine, and I used service to other people to keep myself on the straight and narrow. So it's been a pretty interesting journey, to be honest.
See, that's one of the weird things that I've noticed with a lot of guys, me being myself included on this one. When you start to go down this path where you realize that you're going down a negative path, and me, myself being an alcoholic at one point and almost losing my family over it and ending up in the hospital and everything, it seems like a lot of guys, rather than, like how I guess like most people would expect out of people, when you have these situations, a lot of the time guys don't actually try to go out and seek help from like outside sources. A lot of the time they end up kind of resorting back to diving into like spirituality, some sort of like philosophy, and they almost try to like figure it out for themselves in a certain extent, and then again try to expand into like spirituality. And depending on like which path you end up going down, it seems like a lot of guys will kind of get into like philosophy, for example, to start to try to like sort this stuff out. And once you start building up into philosophy, it kind of builds into this like spiritual aspect of things. And once you build into this like spiritual aspect of things, you start feeling like fulfilled again. And then from there, you're able to start actually like helping people around you again. It's kind of like this like weird progression with guys that it's almost like you have to like build yourself up from the inside out to be able to help others. But it seems like on the flip side, a lot of the time, those signs that a guy actually needs maybe a little bit of like pushing and guidance isn't always like seen by other people. And unfortunately, it takes a guy who's been through the ringer, so to speak, a few times to actually notice these patterns and hopefully try to steer guys in the right direction. And a lot of the time, it's not even necessarily saying like, oh, this is what you need to do or anything like that. It's mainly like steering people into the right direction of things to look into. Like, for example, a lot of the time, like giving somebody a Bible when they're in those situations, like just giving somebody something to look forward to or some type of like guidance seems to be the way to go with guys, but not, again, directly like being initially like part of the solution, just kind of giving them like a way to like pave the path, so to speak.
Yeah, I think that men in general just need to start being more responsible again and showing up. Like as I said, I was functioning, running businesses, making bills, etc. But that's not good enough. 50% is not good enough for your family. They require you to be present. What happened if something had happened in the middle of the night whenever I was off my face and I needed to be sober for, it's just not good enough. We need to be more responsible for ourselves and for others. And it's not like we've got into such a culture of just excusing things and ignoring things. Like, why do we not check our friends? And I don't mean check on them like, are you okay, bud? I mean check on them and you're living like an asshole, mate. And you need to fucking wise up. You're going to lose your wife. We need to start talking to people harder, but in love, to brother to brother, especially man to man. Like, men do need to talk more, but not this mental health bullshit, not this soft fucking sit around a campfire and sing Kumbaya nonsense. We need to have real talk, and even philosophy and psychology. All these things do very, very good jobs of describing the problem, but they do nothing in regards to solving the issue. Like the likes of Freud, Alan Watts, Carl Jung, all these men were broken themselves, and we're basing our analysis on broken men's frameworks. So I even think what we're given to analyze ourselves is broken, and we just need to start going back to old school things like biblical standards. It's not as boring as it sounds.
So we need to find this middle ground, because it seems like a lot of the time things kind of go in this progression where, if you look at like men back in the day, it's like this overt masculinity to the point where, like you were kind of mentioning, there's not really that like talking amongst men to really make sure that you're like mentally good and being checked. But we also had this like spot where it seemed like we got into the point where like men were becoming like too feminine. Like, I don't know about you, man, but it seems like the past like 10 years or so, almost like any place I walk into, 20 years ago, before that, it was like, I was always the smallest guy in the building. But now it's like, for the most part, this younger generation, I'm not that big of a dude, but, I could kick anybody's ass in this group. And it's kind of like sad. So it's kind of like we have this like weird progression as men where it was like overly masculine, overly feminine. And now it seems like there's a lot of these guys that are just trying to find this like good middle spot. And with this good middle spot, we're trying to push it into like the next generation where it's like, you don't want to be an overly masculine man where you're not able to actually take care of your woman on like an emotional level, but you also don't want to be too feminine to the point where like, if some guy starts getting in front of your girl that you're not gonna be able to stand up for like a man's fucking supposed to, So I feel like we're kind of in this like weird bounce back period right now where a lot of guys are kind of figuring out like what exactly like guys need, what exactly we need to be like mentally clear, but without being like too feminine about it, so to speak. Because like you were kind of mentioning, like just talking to guys in general, like, you can't just be like, hey man, I really think this would be the way that you should do things. Your best guy friend, you're going to say something like, hey man, you're really fucking this shit up. You need to go about this shit a little bit better. Otherwise you're going to end up completely losing your family and shit. We're like, it seems like we're in this good path where maybe in like a generation or two, we'll have this like good middle ground where we can really figure out like where this good spot of like masculinity is. But, I feel like in order to figure that out, we of course have to have these sways in both directions. But unfortunately, with that sway in both directions, we get to see the worst of both sides.
100%. And I think proper masculinity has always respected women. And that's the fear. People, I believe, get a very wrong view of what masculinity has been previously. It's not like women used to be fucking locked in the house and chained to the kitchen. They were revered within the home. Feminism destroyed their position within the household and within society. It was a psyop, but hey.
I mean, just my perspective, and hopefully people don't take this the wrong way, but at one point, we were able, as a society, to have one person working, one person home with the kids, and be able to educate the kids, make sure everything's going right with the kids, make sure the family's functioning properly. And for the sake of feminism, we gave up that ability to now we have a point where nobody's able to stay home. We now have the government, for the most part, if you're doing government schooling, teaching your kids. So with this whole like feminism movement, you basically gave up your autonomy of family family and kind of made it so that now we don't have this ability for just one single person to work, because that was part of the whole psyop, was that if you're able to break apart the family, of course, then, you know, if everybody's at work, then you can now educate the younger generation all on your own.
Yeah, I mean, there was an interview with Yuri Bezmenov in the 1980s, a Soviet defector in America, where he talked about ideological subversion of a nation. And I think we're very much living in that now, where people no longer know up from down. We're told not to believe our eyes anymore, you know. If somebody calls themselves a woman, we just have to accept that, you know. All these different things are by design, and if you interact with them, it's going to have an effect on your mind, you know.
I mean, we've gotten to the point now where it's like you can't even necessarily control the narrative on anything. So the best way to control information is just to throw out as much information as possible. So, I mean, with all these psyops, with all these conspiracies, you know, I'm pretty sure that the real answer is amongst all of the conspiracies, but that's part of the whole intention is, you know, if you're trying to control this one single narrative, of course, there's going to be some deterrence, but if you just throw everything all out at once, you know, people aren't going to necessarily know what the real information is anymore. And just like you were mentioning with him, I think we're there, that there's just so much information being thrown now that really people don't know which direction to go. And almost any rabbit trail makes sense if you start to follow it.
I think we're very much part of the problem, podcasters who deal in the conspiracy genre, because I feel very much like it's a playing field that they have constructed for us to play in. It's just another thing to distract from getting on with real life and being present. And, you know, everything is lived online. Why? You know, why are we not living moments in real life anymore? You see two people out for dinner and they're taking photos, they're taking videos, and they're not being present in the moment. You know, everything is lived online, and that's by design, and it's slowly eroding human connection, and it's had its effects psychologically on the generations it was raised by, and you know, we're seeing the effects of that now. So,
Inquiries of Our Reality will be right back after this brief commercial break, so stay tuned. And now back to the show. I mean, I feel like that partially comes into like the whole issue as far as like people not necessarily feeling like they have a place in society, because back in the day, of course, you know, with your family, for example, you know, if things started to get rough, people were more prone to actually stick it out for a little while. But nowadays, if things are starting to get rough, you know, people start to stray. They go on the internet, they start talking to somebody over here, they start talking to somebody over there. Next thing you know, the complete family's broken again. You know, I feel like this is one of those continuous things that, you know, we've developed to live in such a throwaway culture that we've gotten to the point where we almost feel like a compatible mate is almost just as throwaway. Like, you know, we think that there's this infinite number of people in the world, so there's this infinite possibility that we'll find that right person again, not realizing that once in a lifetime connection only sometimes comes once in a lifetime. But the internet, for example, is throwing us into this head loop of just thinking that basically anything is at the reach of our fingertips, that, you know, we're more than willing to burn bridges now as far as just normal connection, normal people in our community around us, because we think that we have this community infinitely at our fingertips. But realistically, it's not as big as we actually think it is. And once you actually start going onto the internet and realizing it, you know, a lot of those people that you think are all these people in your community are actually just bots, and you're actually living within this small echo chamber of just burning bridges of all the people around you and putting yourself into this like hermit type situation, which again is probably part of the psyop.
Yeah, it's utter bollocks. You know, I really threw myself into the podcasting at the start and was maybe like, you know, knocking out 3-4 episodes a week, and, you know, spending my evenings lining up interviews and all the rest. But since I started living in the real world, interviews have started coming to me without asking, and things have just naturally paced out better because, as you said earlier at the start, you know, the podcast evolves with you, you know, and I am more grounded in the real world now than I am in rabbit holes. I believe you can affect more change when you're living in the real world than living offline. I do believe that there is a time and a place for discussion, and that's why I still have the podcast, and that's why I still have, you know, interesting guests on like Guy Anderson and different things. But I'm in the real world action. I'm sort of post analysis, and I'm in the building things and moving things forward in real life as opposed to procrastination online.
So I'm with you there, actually. When I first started the podcast, just like a lot of people, it was during the time when everybody was like stuck in their houses and everything. I mean, I was working full time at the time, but that was just for whatever reason around the time that everybody was starting everything up. And ironically, like the longer that I've actually been doing the podcast, the less that I want to be involved with anything with social media, anything like that. The more I've just learned to live in the real world, to the point where it's like sometimes I won't even end up going through my social media more than like once or twice a week, because I've just developed so much to go and want to actually be in the real world. Like you were kind of mentioning, it's like, it's kind of funny. The whole like conspiracy community probably isn't necessarily helping the problem, but on the flip side of it, it's kind of made me realize that there's this like time and place for things. And it's like, I always end up running the podcast because I always like having these conversations. And I think these conversations are really important. But on the other side, it seems like the important conversations for the podcast have evolved to, a lot of the time it's more so talking about like this whole idea of like being a man in today's society, dealing with the problems of today's society. But I feel like that's the stuff that people need to hear nowadays, because, back when everything was going on with COVID and everything, people wanted to live in this conspiracy world because they wanted to live in this like almost like this world that they believe that everything isn't quite as it seems. Like it kind of gives people like hope in a weird way. But nowadays it just seems like everything has just gotten to a point where it's just so like we're just getting bashed with just so much stuff constantly. Like people are just want somebody to check up on them now. So it's just kind of weird that it's like the podcast has changed to at least just like you put me in the real world and has actually tried to make me hopefully make that connection to the real world to actually help people as far as, again, some of these mental health issues, the things that we're dealing with in today's society, and pulling people away from that like conspiracy hole that people get trapped in all the time.
I think also we're at a point where, all the conspiracies have pretty much been proven to be correct.
True.
Let's fucking move along and start doing stuff in the real world, whether that be talking to your elderly neighbor who you haven't seen in a couple of days, check on somebody, but most importantly, get your own house in order first. I mean, I think men especially need to get back to being present and sober as much as humanly possible, because we need to start showing up for our women, for our children, and for our communities.
Dude, we had a generation where we got psyoped into thinking that was how the general male acted. Like, I don't know what generation you were in as far as like the TV shows and stuff that you grew up with, but a lot of the shows that I grew up with like the 90s and 2000s, it was this typical like, for lack of a better term, like dumbass dad or like the drunken dad. So it's like, it almost like showed a generation that it was like, this is like what people expect out of the dad. Like prime example, like Homer Simpson, for example, typical dumbass, also a drunk, and then really good show, but Malcolm in the Middle. Dad's kind of a dumbass, follows the mom. He's definitely like the beta in the situation. Like we had a whole entire generation where all of these different sitcoms were brought up on these male characters where they were just these like passive drunks. And unfortunately, it was like the 80s generation, it was like the start of that where they still kind of had these masculine males, but they were still kind of like the drunk of the house. Like it's been so normalized over so many generations that it's almost become part of like the typical idea that when people think of like a masculine male, they think of this like beer drinking, whiskey drinking guy. And I think that was, again, part of like the psyop, because they know that if you're drunk, you're not present. And this is something that we've seen from generation to generation, to the point where we know that this causes generational negative effects, such as if a father has a problem with addiction, more than likely the son will also have a problem with addiction. And instead of actually addressing the problem that, males don't need to drink like that, we just continue on in this echo chamber of thinking, oh yeah, today's society, we drink, masculine men, let's drink beer, let's drink whiskey. But again, maybe that goes back to that whole thing that most people are unfortunately living for the weekend. So that's unfortunately like their benefit to the week, unfortunately.
This is the result of people allowing themselves to be conditioned by media, by school, by all these things that have fed forward these lies that have conditioned, a generation to be this way. I have thankfully always had an issue with authority and questioned what the fuck was going on here. I've never just took things for granted. I've always wondered why every male character was a buffoon. I looked deeper into things, and maybe that has caused me equal problems and solved equal problems as well. It's it's been a different journey. Like I mean, I'm not going to it's like whenever you find out about subliminal messages in movies, doesn't mean you have to stop watching movies. You just watch them and you're like, oh, there's a subliminal. You're just not affected by what they're the narratives behind these films, or the psyops, as you would call it, that they're trying to implode onto you.
Talking about psyops too, at least coming from at least from like your culture and stuff like that in Ireland, it seems like when you think about like northern UK, you usually think about like people that go against the rules. They don't want it to go with the typical monarchy ideas, the typical ideology. Like Ireland and Scotland have always been like the rebels, so to speak, of like the UK. So how weird has it been being somebody from that area to see like the culture start to like shift and change as far as like being this like rebel type society to turning into almost like this society of, for lack of a better term, like trying to turn the males into like beta males, so to speak?
Pathetic. It's been utterly pathetic, but at the same time, the reaction now is also pathetic. So we've now got a reaction to the mass migration in this country, which we've got a lot of angry white men now out on the streets shouting and beating their chests all of a sudden about foreign people raping their women. But where have they been for the last 20 to 30 years when society's been going to shit? It's only here. We're only here now because you just haven't showed up for the last 30 years, like that. And now all of a sudden, and to be honest, like the people that are generally out protesting the whole are the ones their own houses aren't in order. They're sniffing gear, drinking. It's like, how do you have the right to go out and shout about our women and our children when you're not even presenting correctly at home?
Just out of curiosity, I don't know how the when laws end up getting passed over there, is it something that ends up going for like the entire island itself, or is it like something that just happens individually like England and like Ireland? And if so, does it seem like typically, does it seem like Ireland has a little bit more of like a pushback against these things than like England would, for example? Or does it seem like it's kind of gotten to the point where all of the men are kind of like universally the same, and there's not really this like differentiation between this like Irish like tension of like not wanting to put up with like the typical bullshit that like the Southern Island's trying to push?
2020 showed us that Ireland has been completely deballed. We had Protestant and Catholics both just submitting to the rules of the government, staying 2 meters apart, staying indoors, only having 6 people in the garden. I just could not believe the madness that was going on in 2020, and it just proved to me that this country is lost as well. It used to be that Northern Ireland had a strong religious backbone, but it was clear in 2020 that has long since gone. So,
just from like personal experience, man, I thought it was extremely strange that. So growing up, I had this really good friend who grew up in Ireland, moved to the United States, and he was like that typical, for lack of a better term, coming from like an American, of course, like a typical like Irish kid. He was the one that, wouldn't take shit from nobody. I was like one of the smaller kids in school. He was a little bit bigger. So like, if anybody tried to start shit, he was like the first one to try to like go up and like headbutt people, like took absolutely no shit. Just like typical like hard ass like Irish kid, man. And he moved back to Ireland when we were teenagers. And ironically, like you were kind of mentioning, after like COVID and everything like that, I always had this like idea of him and like the person that he used to be. And then right after all that stuff started happening, I started seeing these pictures of like him wearing the masks, posting the pictures of like, oh, did you get your vaccine? Did you get this and all this? And it's just like, wow, man, that's so crazy to think that, this person that just had that like natural, like, Irish blood, so to speak, could just be psyops so quickly. And I mean, it's something that we saw happen everywhere, but I just, again, having that fighting spirit of coming from that country, of always being like the rebels, like it's so sad to see that happen, because I figured that you guys be one of the last ones that were still kicking and fighting,
Pathetic, utterly pathetic. And I think I was like the only person in my entire friendship group that was not getting their COVID jab or wearing the mask. It was just insanity to me. It was clearly a fucking psyop. There was nobody. We were in the middle of a pandemic and there was no spike in adverse deaths. Like, hello, people. There's nobody dropping beside you on the street sick. How is this a pandemic, folks?
Ironic too that right after this like pandemic where they're extremely scared and they have to close all the borders, right after that, what's the next thing that comes? Mass immigration issues.
And then Ukraine war to distract. It's all theater. And to be honest, I have not watched the news or anything like that in so long, and it's refreshing because you're not being programmed. They tell you it's called TV programming for a reason. They're programming you, and I don't wish to be programmed. So,
said at a certain point, I'm pretty sure that they're trying to do. My brain farting on the name of what it's called right now. They're essentially basically trying to like push out like the European type culture. Like that I'm pretty convinced of it at this point, that it seems like almost all these countries, specifically like the UK for whatever reason, like you guys are getting pushed out. Everybody's being pushed out. Like there's this continuous destruction of European culture, it seems like. And I mean, there's a whole different other million different conspiracy worms you can go in. But the main reason that I wanted to try to bring this up was the main fact of not getting into the whole conspiracy rabbit hole, but I feel like everybody should be proud of who they are and their culture. And regardless of what society tells you, just because, you're a white guy from the United States or you're a white guy from Ireland, just because you're a white guy doesn't mean that you shouldn't be proud of your culture. You shouldn't be proud of your heritage. You shouldn't be proud of where you came from. And I feel like a part of a lot of the issues in today's society is they've tried to make everybody that's from European descent feel guilty for their culture, not realizing that the culture of Europe has essentially built the world as we know it today. So every single culture has made some issues in the past, but just because of that doesn't mean that you should completely throw your entire culture out with the bathwater. There's a lot more people that would just not take pride to the point where, you're putting down other people, because that's where the issue always comes in. But just being proud of who you are as a person, being proud of your culture as a person, don't let your culture get destroyed. Keep your culture alive. I feel like we'll be in a lot better place as a society if we're able to do that.
100%, yeah. I think people just need to start having the balls to live how they want to live. And I don't mean like the situation that we find ourselves in where everybody be what you want to be, but start being responsible for your life. First of all, you cannot be anything if you're not showing up for yourself, first and foremost. And then you show up for other people. It's very, very straightforward. We've got away from any real meaning to anything. We're content with just, as we said earlier, living for the weekend or whatever, when really life is so much more than that. Every day can be so much more than that. It just depends what you put into that day, what you get out of it. And I don't mean that in a quote type way, but there's some days I'm fucking pissed off and I'll go into town and give out the Baps to the homeless guys, and you get instant perspective. Life's not that bad. It could be a lot fucking worse, and you need to assess where you're at and build from there.
Well, I mean, also too, for the sake of talking about self-control and also inspiring others, of course. Before we run out of time, I wanted to make sure that we're able to dive into this new event that you were coming up with. You were mentioning it, I believe, on the podcast I listened to previously. You had mentioned it when we were talking on Facebook a bit earlier today. But I'd love to dive into this event that you're training for and why exactly that you decided to do this.
Oh, the boxing match.
Yes, yes, sir.
Well, I wanted to challenge myself physically after getting sober, and I also want to get into a violent situation and do so in a controlled manner and just try and remain calm. It's, to be honest, it's for personal growth more than anything. The guy that I'm boxing, he's got like 20 something years experience, so it'll be fun.
So, are you doing any type of like fundraising or anything with this event, trying to give back to the community?
So, like the last 130 days has pretty much been given back to the community. I raised £6,000 for a girl, Brianna, who has a neurological disease called the Kevia syndrome, which means that she can't really move and it's difficult for her mum to work with her. So we raised money to get like a piece of medical equipment so her mother could like change her and stuff at a more comfortable height, and that's dramatically changed her life. Last Sunday, Sunday past, just finished a 40-kilometer sponsored walk. And anything that I make off the boxing match will be put back into community work as well. I've never had less money than I do right now, but I've never felt more full spiritually and personally, so.
No, dude, I was going to say that's absolutely beautiful what you're doing, because it's filling a couple niches all at once. I mean, one, you're able to do continuously this charity work that you're trying to do, which is absolutely awesome. Two, I'm assuming that you're probably going to end up inspiring a lot of these younger guys in your community, some of the kids and stuff that end up coming in, seeing that, if this is something you typically haven't done before and you're pushing yourself to something that you haven't done before, definitely something inspirational to them. And on the flip side of you, something that we were talking about a bit earlier with just guys' mental health, man. Sometimes I feel like as a guy, you just need to get into these like violent situations. And when you can do it in a controlled atmosphere, like that's even better, man. Like I feel like as a guy, it's a necessity to be into some form or some sense of like fighting, because it's a good way to be able to relieve your frustration. And again, do it in a controlled sense. Like you don't want to go out and beat the shit out of some guy at a bar like a lot of these guys do, because that's how you end up getting yourself thrown in jail. But if you get into some type of organized thing, like, simply going to a boxing gym or getting into jiu-jitsu or whatever some of these guys do, it's a good way to be able to relieve some of this anxiety, get into these very male testosterone type situations, which I think our brain naturally needs to be in because we're just driven to be in those situations. But getting back around full circle, man, I think it's really cool that you're able to do multiple things all at once with this organization and with this event that you're doing, man.
Yeah, well, the event's sort of secondary. The event came off the back of everything that I've been doing. So through the sobriety journey, we gained, so we've got like 28,000 followers now on the Facebook page, and a very, very active community, and they're very quick to support everything, and it's been fantastic. And then I was tagged in the boxing event asking would I fancy a fight, and I just agreed to it. So that's how the event came about, and anything, as I say, that's made off that will go straight back into the homeless work. And I'm not really here to benefit, like, I don't really give a fuck about personal wealth. So as long as I'm comfortable.
Hey, man, that's all you need, though. If you're actually getting into the point of wanting to give back to the community, most of the guys that I talk to in these situations, it's never about money. It's all about just what they're able to do. And the most that they can give is when they feel the most fulfilled. It's not, when they have the most change in their pocket. It's when, they have the opportunities to be able to do these things and not make a big deal out of it,
Yeah, and it doesn't always have to be financial. I think that's the important thing. The biggest thing we have and the biggest currency we have is our time. And giving our time for others is one of the most selfless and beautiful things we can do, because it aids yourself and it's obviously helping the other person. So,
hold on tight, guys. This is our last break, so stay tuned. And we are back to the show. So let's hop right in. Well, I guess this might be a perfect spot before we get into how people might be able to help out your cause, of course. I always like to wrap up the show with some words of wisdom. So if there's any words of wisdom you might want to bestow on the listeners today, man, what might it be?
So I would just say we were never meant to be like this. Outsourcing responsibility, outsourcing family, and outsourcing community. Piece by piece, the system didn't just appear overnight. It was built slowly. It incentivized dependence, removed the need for men to stand, and removed the need for families to stay together. And then we act surprised when everything collapses. Strong families were replaced with systems, communities were replaced with services, and responsibility replaced with entitlement. And people wonder why things feel off. This is not about politics, it's about reality. When you remove the need to rely on each other, you remove the glue that holds everything together. We don't need to build back better. We need to restore what's already been there.
Truth, man. And I mean, you can definitely see it in today's society that there's this disconnect from previous generations where I know that there's been some other minds that have talked about this, but almost kind of like connected it with like almost like the idea of Maoism, that the only way that you can indoctrinate this new ideology is if you're able to break away the previous generations or the newer generations from previous generations. But if we're able to, on the flip side, disconnect from that and actually stay together as a community and actually keep this wealth of knowledge together and realize that we're stronger together, then always we'll be better off as a society and as a community altogether. But people have disconnected from that and they need to get back and realize that, and maybe even jump over that fence one time and say hello to your neighbor here and there.
100%.
And man, if anybody wanted to possibly come and check out your podcast, anybody that might even be in Ireland in the Belfast area, if they wanted to possibly get involved with trying to help you out as much as possible, donating to your cause, possibly even seeing this boxing match, or just again getting involved with anything they are possibly doing, where can people connect with you on the internet? Where could they possibly donate to your cause, and where can they check out your podcast too, man?
So the podcast is called the Belfast Bapcast, and it's just on YouTube and all the audio platforms as well. So Bapcast, B-A-P, cast. And then the business page, which I'd be the most active on, would be the Belfast Breakfast Baps page. And you'll find that on Facebook. And we are based on the Woodstock Road in Belfast, which is East Belfast, just slightly outside the city centre. So about 20-minute walk from the city centre. If you wanted to support the work that we do, we have a Buy Me a Coffee. So it's buymeacoffee.com/the Belfast Bapcast. And then PayPal as well. Just youngmark801@gmail.com. So.
Well, man, I really appreciate you making the time to come on with me, especially considering that it's so late and I know you got to get up so early to be able to go and get all of your breakfast stuff going, man. But I really appreciate the conversation. I appreciate you sharing your journey with people. And I'm really looking forward to see where your work goes. And hopefully we'll get to chat again in the future, man.
Yes, brother. Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Big thank you to all of you guys for checking out this week's episodes. Just a reminder, this show wouldn't be possible without listeners like you. Podcasts are a labor of love, and I want to be able to keep this show going for as long as possible. If you guys like to support the show and all the hard work behind it, please consider leaving a review or rating for the show anywhere that you guys happen to listen to the show. It is always appreciated, and I will read it on the show and give you guys a big shout out. You guys can also share the show through word of mouth because, to be honest with you guys, that is the only way that podcasts grow. So anything that you guys do as far as word on the street is always appreciated. And if you guys are in a position to support the show and find value in what I do, please consider donating to the show directly through Cash App, Venmo, or PayPal. That is always the best and absolutely preferred way that you guys can help out the show and make sure that this show is able to keep running for as long as possible. And you guys can also go and check out the Patreon. Over there, you guys get full access for $2.50 a month. If you guys want to see what it's all about, there is a 7-day free trial. And if you guys like it, you guys can hopefully stick around. And last but not least, you guys can go and check out the Bizarre Reality Media merch store with t-shirts just $15.68 plus shipping, which equals out to about $20. So about average for a t-shirt. And you guys can support the little guy in the process. And if you guys want to keep up to date on the show, you guys can go and follow the show on Instagram and on Facebook. And you guys can also catch live shows and video content on the Bizarre Reality Media TikTok, YouTube, and Rumble channels. And if you guys need another podcast to get you guys through your work week, please consider going and checking out my other show, Bizarre Encounters with Shayn Orin, if you guys haven't already. We've gotten a lot of fascinating stuff going on over there recently. A lot of the same stuff that we talk about on this show, but in a different format because it's a lot of our research instead of us having guests on. So if you guys are into that kind of stuff, maybe something else to get you guys through the work week. And if you guys missed any of that, every single thing that I mentioned is all available in the link tree, which is available down in that show description. And with that, hope you guys enjoyed the conversation. Hope today's show has connected some dots in your own reality. And I'll catch you guys on the next one. Have a good night, everybody.
Reality isn't what it seems. Abductees taking aboard a craft with a tractor beam. Is life a simulation or an astral dream? Aliens travel through black holes in different galaxies. Life is a bizarre odyssey. With a mic talking about philosophy. Well, Bigfoot is stalking campers as a Wendigo walks through the woods of sharpened antlers, using a Ouija board to talk to the dead like a necromancer. There's so many questions and not enough answers. So if you're interested in mysteries and abnormalities, tune in and listen to Inquiries of Our Reality. So if you're interested in mysteries and abnormalities,